The cycles are beyond our ability to change, but they are within our capacity to recognize and understand. And as we learn to harmonize with nature rather than trying to fight against nature, these are natural cycles. There are natural forces that are driving these cycles. Humans contribute, certainly. Humans are contributing to climate change, but they're not causing it. Humans are contributing to the way the economic cycles play out, but humans, there have always been the exchange of vital resources among humans. Humans are subject to the influence of magnetic fields. We are not slaves. We are not slaves to those. When we recognize them, this is when I spoke at the United Nations with Bruce Lipton, this is what we said to them very, very clearly. What we said was that we are vulnerable and susceptible, but we are not slaves to the cycle. And as you recognize that the cycle exists, it is an invitation to be more conscious, to be more aware. If you're at the United Nations, this is an invitation to be very clear in your communications, to be very, very clear, to extend the olive branch, give a benefit of a doubt to another person or to another nation. And because we are vulnerable to the cycles, it opens the door also to the greatest possibilities of peace, the greatest possibilities of cooperation. So they are beyond us in terms of controlling the rhythms, but it is within our capacity to recognize that we are part of a natural world. And as we ride, as we surf the rhythms of nature, it actually empowers us. What the science is showing is that as we learn to harmonize with the magnetic fields of the earth, our intuition is even deeper and more powerful. And we become even more aware of the deep connection with the earth. So that's actually a blessing that we are living these natural rhythms. Where we run into the struggle and the hurt is if we choose not to recognize these things, and we are stuck in a way of thinking that we've always done in the past, and we try to continue that way of thinking and living in the presence of a world that has changed because the cycles are changing it. That's where the suffering comes from. That's where the hurt comes from. So I just wanted to clarify, it is that they are huge. It's vast, and most people don't have time to think about cosmic cycles. Recognize the cycles. What we see in the past is that when these cycles converge, the effects are intense and they are brief. Brief as within maybe a few decades. It doesn't go on and on and on and on. So we have this little precious window of time when we're going through a change that we've never seen. And for me, one of the most beautiful things of this time is that it is when things are changing that there is a willingness to embrace new ideas. There's an openness now to new thinking and new ideas that wasn't here 10 years ago. It may not be 10 years from now. So this is why I think it's so important for us not to hold back, but to come forward with the new ideas of sustainability, of cooperative, localized living, localized economies, localized food, localized services. Community is key. Community is where the action is. Community and decentralization. This is much more sustainable in the presence of a world that's changing, rather than a centralized way of governing or a centralized way of creating food or centralized economies. They tend not to do well when big systemic changes are happening, but the localized shifts, the localized ways of living seem to be much more resilient in these times of change. And we know that intuitively. You don't need somebody to tell you that. We know. And we're naturally drawn, farm-to-table produce. I mean, that's the way to go. Localized energy, you know. Solar energy works where I live in the high desert of New Mexico. It may not work if you're living on the coast and you're in fog, you know, 9 of the 12 hours of daylight. You know, solar energy may not work. So it makes sense to capitalize on what you have available to you locally. And we know that intuitively. So we're just formalizing so that we can apply in our lives what intuitively makes sense and what we found from the history of the past.